answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
You've said, though, that if you did run for president, you believe you'd win.
Well, I don't know. I think I'd win. I tell you what, I wouldn't go in to lose. I've never gone in to lose in my life.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us. It's about us.
Our biggest enemy against that truth is the deep state. And we are on a mission to annihilate the deep state.
General Flynn, he's some general, he's some man. He took abuse like nobody could have handled, and he came out bigger, better, stronger than ever before. We love him. He's a leader. And you just stay wealthy and healthy and well and everything. I want you to have great lives in general. You just have to stay healthy because we're bringing you back. We're going to bring you back.
Whatever happened to Gary Cooper, the strong, silent type? That was an American.
Our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment with a new government controlled by you, the American people. The Washington establishment and the financial and media corporations that fund it exist for only one reason: to protect and enrich itself. The establishment has trillions of dollars at stake in this election. For those who control the levers of power in Washington and for the global special interest, they partner with these people that don't have your good in mind.
$14,
13, 12, 11,
7, 6, 5.
Sir, we have a launch order.
3,
Put your hand on the keys,
2,
sir.
1. Launch.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
My name is Patrick Byrne, domestic extremist threat number 1. Or not. Perhaps I'm just somebody who's willing to say the emperor has no clothes. You can decide for yourself.
Patrick Byrne.
They're following everything that you've been working on.
Yes, sir. Understood.
You may know of me as the CEO of this $2 billion e-commerce company, but really, I have this other life.
You have an unusual relationship with the United States government?
Sir, why are you bringing this up?
The FBI needed me to set up a bribe.
We can't have agents running around creating crimes.
You know, it would violate too many rules for us to do it, but if you're willing to go do it, we'll look the other way.
Hello, my name is Maria Butina.
Then I would make it happen. Instead of being happy, they say,
just let it play.
What?
Let it play?
Now, I know this may look like the Deep Throat scene from All the President's Men, but where do you think that stuff comes from? These things happen.
What you think you know.
I was encouraged to have a relationship.
What you think you are.
And it's heated up.
I'm going to meet the Trumps.
I was starting to realize the feds were using Maria to smudge up the Republican Party. And they were using me to use Maria. And this truth is going to be so explosive.
Erase every moment from your memory.
If you do this long enough, you begin to feel like an enemy of your own country.
They're going to arrest this Russian grad student so they could say, no, there is an actual Russian at the center of our Russian collusion drama. A civilization all begins with the rule of law. And once that gets corrupted, it's like my worst fears have just been realized. I don't know, maybe I'm just being sensitive.
Welcome to the 40,000-foot view, everybody. I am Mark Messina, also known as 8-Track. I want to thank you all for being here today at this special afternoon showtime. I was a little worried wasn't going to see a lot of folks, but the live chat and even the X streams are filling up pretty quickly. So I'm excited to have all of you here. This is just episode 8. since I went solo and started this new channel, and we're growing quickly, and it's because of you guys. So I want to thank you for your continued support, your subscriptions, your sharing. And on that note, if you are watching on X right now, please go ahead and give a retweet so we can get as many live eyes on this as possible. And as always, if you are here on Rumble, we love you. Thank you for your support. And please hit that thumbs up button right now so you don't forget, and give a subscribe if you haven't already. Well, tonight or today, I'm really genuinely excited to get to know this guest. I think a lot of us are very familiar with this man's work, but I really want to get inside the mind of this person because his story is truly incredible. From the start, Patrick Byrne studied at Dartmouth College, where he earned a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy and Asian Studies. He also spent time studying in China and Thailand, furthering his education in Eastern philosophies and language. He was then a Marshall Scholar at Cambridge University, where he obtained a master's in philosophy. Finally, he completed his education with a doctorate in philosophy from Stanford. As if that's not enough, he went on to turn Overstock.com into nearly a $2 billion company. Later, he filed lawsuits against major Wall Street firms, including Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, accusing them of facilitating naked short selling. And then finally, after the 2020 election, he became an advocate for election integrity and financially supported audits in several states, which landed him a meeting at the White House with President Trump. Please welcome to the stage, Patrick Byrne.
Mark, what an honor to be on your show.
Sir, the honor is all mine. Your story it's really incredible. And I think what impresses me the most is that you've been very successful in your life. You've accomplished a lot of things. By all accounts, you could have a very relaxed, comfortable life. But going back all the way to Wall Street, you have been making a lot of noise and sticking your neck out for what's right. I'd really like to get inside your mind and understand, maybe starting at your childhood, what makes a man who has everything he needs decide to rock the boat like that?
Oh, my mother, and it's mentioned in the movie and in the book. It's really my mother raised me right. I guess I'm reminded of how about 20 years ago, some Wall Street guy said to me, Byrne, what I really like about you is you don't mind, destroying your reputation. Most guys make 100 million, 200 million bucks. All they care about is they just want to be their reputation, their name. That's all they worry about. You just sizzled it. You didn't care at all. You just deep fried your reputation. You didn't care. That's right. And I did. I took on Wall Street and Goldman Sachs and all these people. And for 3 years, the press portrayed me as this lunatic until 2008 came and everything I had predicted came true. And then they all said, okay, the guy was vindicated, but then they shut up about me. And it's been, so it isn't much. I really give the credit to my mom. And if you see the movie, my mom is depicted in several scenes. She's really the one who built me this way. But yeah, I thought it was kind of crazy when I was fighting Wall Street and discovering that, if you walked down a Haston Alley and you saw some old ladies getting mugged, you would feel some responsibility to do something. I was a public company CEO. I was out there in the mix. And when you're in the mix, you have different people eventually taking you to dinner and saying things like, kid, we can make a lot of money together if you're willing to play ball. And I started realizing there was all this corruption on Wall Street. And I went to the authorities. The funniest thing was, I'll close on this. I thought the world worked like the Pelican Brief. Like Julia Roberts sits and types up her term paper explaining the evil some corporation is up to, and just goes on the internet, and the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post swoops in, the DOJ comes in. They say, reality is nothing like that. When you discover corruption, that corruption feeding some powerful mouths, and those mouths all have senators on speed dial, and they have regulators on speed dial, so they can make your world crash in on you. It is not at all like the Pelican Brief.
Right. I mean, you made a good point. And by the way, for everyone watching, later in this interview, we are going to get into the movie because I watched it. It's incredible. I love series. It's a docu-series. There's 3 parts. I hope you make 10 more parts and it goes on Netflix because honestly, it is so great. Spiro Pictures made it. I got to meet, was it Matt and Joy? here in Vegas. I was at an event with Seth Keshel, and I got to meet them. So talented.
General Flynn was really the force behind that movie, though. He designed it. His name's not on it, but I would call him the executive producer. It was his vision, and Matt executed it beautifully.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got a few clips from him speaking in it, which says a lot more than it says, if you know what I mean. But you also have him playing himself in one of the scenes, which I want to talk about that scene later, because I have a lot of questions, because it's truly incredible, that audience you got and the things you said to Trump. I mean, honestly, but what I think is going to resonate with my crowd here is that you are like us in that you don't care what people think about you or your reputation, as long as you're doing what's right. And I mean, that kind of defines the folks that are in here watching you right now. All of us have stuck our necks out in our life. Not a lot of us, I'm sure some, but most of us didn't have as much to lose as you. But nonetheless, like, you're down here doing the things that us common folk are doing.
Well, it's been an eye-opening experience the last 5 years, because we've been living through a Bolshevik revolution, an overthrow of the U.S., and anyone with half a brain understands that the election of 2020 was rigged. And in the months after that, I actually was ready to leave the country, and General Flynn called me and said, "Don't leave the country. Come down and help me. We'll work and get this movement, build this movement. And they're going to kill you if you leave the country, Patrick. It's really easy for them to kill you. If you're on some beach in South Pacific, they'll just send someone from the embassy to some local gangster and say, look, there's an American living up in that hut 2 miles down the road here. Go kill him. Here's an envelope with $10,000. Kill him, and we'll give you another envelope." And I said, "Well, can't they kill me if I stay in the USA, sir?" He said, "Well, they can, but there's more paperwork involved. So what you want to do is stay in the USA and get as big as possible. That'll make it impossible for them to kill you. They can't, once you're beyond a certain notoriety, killing you creates more trouble than it solves for them." So that's what I did. I stayed in, but we were very surprised in those early days of 2021. We had billionaires and mega billionaires reaching out to us. We were flying around meeting with them, and people telling us, I can't sleep at night. My country's going through a communist revolution. I look at my little granddaughters. How can I sleep at night knowing what's in store for them? Blah, 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 blah. They would go on, and none of them would ever write a check. They would say, "Oh, you know what I want to do? I really want to help you guys. So I've got this big mansion in Jacksonville. I'm going to have a big old party. I'm going to invite all my billionaire friends, and you're going to come and present, and then we'll raise money." So we would go and do that. And then the billionaires in that house would come up and say, "Gosh, this is so scary what you're talking about. I know you're right. I'm so worried. Listen, I've got a big old mansion in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Why don't you come on up there, and I'll get all my billionaire friends together, and you give a talk about all this, and we'll see what money we can." And it just went on and on like that for months. And what we discovered is none of these billionaires were willing to sign a check. They're all worried about their name. They're all worried about what if the IRS leaks, who's behind what. So we got going, and our average donation size in the America Project, which he launched with me, was $47 or something like that. So it's just and I think our median was about $18. So that's just people, it's people who are going without milk on their cereal this week to send us $20, and they write a little note saying that. And that's what kept the country afloat. When the smoke clears and people will understand what happened in these last 4 years, I think the country would have been gone 2 years ago had it not been for this movement that got going, what they call the America First movement, whatever that it's, so it's really been what you call the common people who did it. And the billionaires are such empty suits. I never care if I ever talk to another rich guy again.
You nailed it on the head. I mean, like you and I were talking about briefly before the show, I started as an anonymous person on X, just trying to spread truth without, losing jobs and things like that. And if it weren't for folks like you who had means, who came in and supported audits and things like that, I don't think, we would have been able to be as successful. So it really has been this combined movement. And you're right. People who have the means, by and large,
they set it out.
They don't use it. I lived through the .com boom, right? So I was in New York at the time, so it was Silicon Alley, right? Not Valley. So I was in some of these companies, and some of my friends, this is, a long time ago, made a lot of money, right? I had a stock certificate that was worth the paper it was printed on. So my my .com days didn't work out like that. But my friends, some of them made a lot of money, and they don't want to hear from me about any of this. Is all I do is talk about this stuff. Podcasting was natural, but I've been talking about this stuff since 9/11.
You talk about
They don't want to hear from me.
COVID and things like that. They were willing to let the country just go under, and
all of it. They don't want to hear about corruption. Everything is a tinfoil hat. Everything is a conspiracy theory because they know, right? You get that kind of money. You've got a private jet. You've got the top bankers in the world controlling your finances. They don't want to rock the boat, and they don't say anything. So again, I mean, I've said it a lot, but kudos to you, because without folks like you supporting us, I don't think any of us would be here right now.
I will thank you. It was my honor. It was my honor. I blew through $65 million. I'll tell you.
Oh my gosh.
Half of that was on this movement, this domestic movement, and half of it was on some activities abroad that will come to light soon enough.
I hope that's going to be the next part of the series. I want to ask you something else about your childhood. Did I see this right? You were a wrestler?
Yeah, I was a wrestler.
I was a wrestler, and there's stereotypes about wrestlers. I don't know about you, but I'm going to be 52 soon. It doesn't matter where I am. I could be at a pub with some friends, and someone will just say, some stranger, you were a wrestler, weren't you? Yeah. We carry some sort of an aura. Was that a big thing for you? You talked about Coach Joe.
Yeah, it was a huge part of my childhood. Wrestling was a very big part of my childhood. And then later jiu-jitsu when that came around. But it was a big boxing and wrestling were both very formative experiences for me. And wow. Wrestlers can do anything. When you're a wrestler, you learn. It really is the hardest activity I've ever done in my life, isn't it? And you just learn that what you think are your limits are not your limits. That you're like a machine if you decide to be a machine.
Yeah, you can always dig a little deeper. And what I think I liked about it too is it's just one-on-one, man versus man. You can't hide behind a team. You're not really able to hide behind like fouls and, referees. It's just mano a mano, and, you sink or swim.
Exactly.
So you did jiu-jitsu as well. I didn't know that. Japanese or Brazilian?
I did both. I've done a whole bunch of martial arts. I have a black belt in Taekwondo, but I did mixed martial arts before there was mixed martial arts. And then I discovered in 1988, these Brazilian guys down in Torrance, California, that nobody really knew about at the time, but the Gracie brothers. I went down with them very early when they were just a little one-room dojo, just had moved out of their garage. And I trained on and off with them for years. And then MMA or UFC came along. Should have stayed in.
I've been hoping that we'd have something in common other than the fact that you went to Dartmouth and I got waitlisted from Dartmouth. And I actually studied with Renzo Gracie in New York City.
Did you really?
In the early 2000s. Yeah. Huh. I did wrestling, and then I did Taekwondo in college, competitive at Penn. And then when I got to New York, I found this little gym in Koreatown that Renzo Gracie. I was like, Renzo Gracie has a gym here? So I rolled around with those guys for a while too.
Right on.
I think it shapes you. This is adding more to sort of this superhero mystique I have about you. I think it was the book Spyfall I saw you mention, where James Bamford referred to you as Spider-Man. How did you feel about that? Because I have a different take.
Well, I think Bamford should be taken as Bamford is a long time. He's written the authoritative treatments on the NSA, a number of the Puzzle Palace, a number of he was back in the day so Bamford was briefly in the intelligence community as a young man. Then he went to work for, I think, the Church Committee and I guess my point is, while he holds himself out as being antagonistic to the intelligence community, he also takes some direction from them. And what he wrote in that book, there's not even any way he could know the things he says he's knowing unless he's wrong about the things he says. But even to say them, he's doing the work of the intelligence community to sort of soft sell what it is that I have to say, my story. He doesn't want my story to be, the intelligence community in general does not want my story told, because you understand why.
I mean, I do. And again, I can't stress enough that people need to go see this. And I'll put the link up here in a second. It's what, $13.99 to own the rights for streaming. I definitely will watch it at least 2 or 3 more times because there's so many little details in there and it's so well made. So it's
word for word accurate. It's word for word accurate in almost every scene is word for word accurate. It's a lot of entertainment for $14, but it's people who watch it say, wow, it fits the whole story of the last 10 years together. I finally understand. I was in the middle of everything, the Clinton investigation, the Russian investigation. And when I tell my story and lay it out from the inside, everybody gets, this was all a coup. This was all a coup started really in Thanksgiving of 2015 by Barack Obama, James Comey, and John Brennan against Hillary and against Trump. Whoever won, they wanted to have leverage over. And I was part of it. So it's not a theory. I'm the guy that's, I'm not just pontificating. I was in the middle of it. And these facts and events that I allege happened could all be confirmed in 24 hours by a committee if they wanted to.
Honestly, when people watch it, and the link is on the screen for those of you, it's enemywithindocuseries.com. I cannot recommend it enough. And I'm just curious when people watch it, or if anyone in the comments has seen it already, virtually the entire time, I'm just asking myself, how is he still alive? It's a constant, okay, that's interesting. How is he still alive? Like, it was over and over again. I want to ask you a question.
Reads better than it played. As they say in Broadway, it reads better than it played.
Well, I can't believe it was your life. You talked about, there was one scene where I watched what you said, and then in my head, what I was thinking, you then came on the camera and you said what I was thinking. You go, I know you're probably thinking megalomaniac or delusions of grandeur. And I was literally going, what? Get out of my head.
That's exactly what happened. No, that was that. I remember where I said it, and this is exactly what happened. I was my life was threatened by 3 handlers to keep silent about something. And unbeknownst to them, I had an ace in my back pocket, which is I'd actually been sent to investigate them. So I knew at the end of the day, I mean, people could kill me, but at the end of the day, it was always kind of funny dealing with those people because I knew at the end of the day, I had an ace in my back pocket that I could not be prosecuted. I'd been asked by the Senate Judiciary Committee to infiltrate the deep state. And there was a letter that says I can't be prosecuted. And so the more I got involved with them and the more sketchy the stuff I did for them, then when they tried to intimidate me, they didn't. Mark Twain once referred to somebody as having all the confidence of a Methodist minister with 4 aces. I knew that I had 4 aces in my pocket. So I was able to deal with them. It was a pretty interesting time in my life.
It's incredible. Actually, I want to ask you a question about that. But for the folks who are on Rumble watching, Patrick said he would be open since we're live. If you've got some questions, get your Rumble rants in, and throughout the show, we'll make sure we get them answered for you. Yeah, there was a scene, and I'm not going to give all the details because I want to make sure people want to watch it, where you're then setting a trap for these agents or handlers, I guess we would say, that had threatened you. And so you implied that you were going to kill Maria, knowing that certain triggers would happen and you were setting a trap for them. And then you said when they came back, you could tell from your experience that it hadn't gone through the proper chain of command because the way they handled it is not the way it would have had to. So I think you said like a psychologist or someone would have had to assess it and give them certain things to say. And so you knew that it was sort of rogue. Like, did that scare you to think like, I'm in more danger, or was it less danger?
Well, I was thinking I was more focused on them as their bosses as my prey. They had told me that on this operation, Byrne, we're going to be leaving meetings with you and going back directly to report on video conference to Brennan and Comey directly. So I knew I was in a position to set them up, to set up Brennan and Comey. And that's what I did. And I reported that I had drugged and raped Maria Butina. And I didn't come out and just say it, but I put all these clues in there. So I knew that would go to Brennan and Comey, and to put them in the position of, if they wanted to continue what we were up to, they had to sign off on that. And they did that. They told the agents to ignore it. So then I proposed a month or 2 later that I murder her for them. And I knew that there was no way these agents were going to let that slide. and that turns out to have gone. I knew it would go to Brennan and Comey, and they would have to sign off for any of this stuff to continue, the fake Russia hoax, all the stuff we were doing. And it turns out I found out later, and the movie only hints at who did it, but who I've gone public about who it was. It was Barack Obama. Barack Obama signed a presidential finding telling 3 federal agents to ignore their belief that I had drugged, raped, and was considering murdering a girl that they knew to be innocent, so that we could continue this dark espionage we were doing and setting up. And the funny thing about it was, for that to work, and I planned this. I saw this play in a heartbeat once they opened up. When Maria came to visit, so there were 2 different periods I dated Maria, and the first was quite physical. The second was, which is when this all concerns, I told her, hey, we're going to have this old-fashioned relationship this time, Maria. Now, this time when you visit, you sleep in the guest room. So I did all that so she would have this perfectly clear memory. And it was during that period I told I implicated my chain of command in an aggravated rape and murder, or else they were going to have to stop what we were doing. And they chose, and it was Barack Obama, James Comey, John Brennan, chose to continue and waive the aggravated rape and murder so that we can continue setting up this, basically a coup.
It's kind of like a star-crossed lovers story. So, for folks out there who maybe aren't into the international espionage angle, the docuseries really does have a lot. And I could already see your body language talking about that. Listen, I'm 52. I have never been married. So I get it, but I'd like to be. I'd like to have that life. I've just been really bad in my life at choosing a mate. So
well, there was
a lot of hard lessons.
It was never a question of that between Maria and me, although I am super fond of her. She's a wonderful woman. I think she's on her way to be president of Russia, and they could do a lot worse. And she's now a very well-regarded senator. But we both knew there was nothing like that before us. We were 2 ships in the night. She was connected to some important people. She knew I was connected to some important people. We just knew we were having this affair. So it wasn't really about some big romantic affair with her, but I don't mean to disrespect her. She's a wonderful woman. And I do think she's on her way to become president of Russia. But I saw her as an instrument to investigate our own deep state with, basically. That's what I saw her as. I knew by 2010 I was working for some people who were involved in corruption. And I can't go public about what I know, but I knew from 2010 forward that things didn't smell right. When she came along, we were talking about wrestling. It reminds me of when I was a wrestler, played football. We would take a plastic mouth guard and boil it at the beginning of each season, boil it. And when it was mushy, take it and bite it and make a mold of our teeth. And that was your mouth guard for the season. Well, Maria, I guess I saw her, as fond as I was of her, I saw her as a mouth guard. I saw her as something we could drop into the pot of the national security state and pull it out. And I'm going to be able to show America how corrupt is our deep state. It's this corrupt. And they did just what I just suspected they would do. It had nothing to do with their job. They're all about scheming. They're all about scheming, and they're just schemers.
So you've been doing work for years as this designated expert, I think is what you call it, where you've worked for various intelligence agencies, doing things. So, it's presumable, like in the docuseries, that, they were trying to now kind of use you to spin up this Russia thing against Trump, but you were simultaneously in parallel using it to out their corruption.
Yeah, good. And I try to stay away in general from saying I did intelligence work. I don't think of myself as a spook. I'm not a spy. I'm more like a scholar or something that they asked to come and give lectures sometime. But on occasion, I did things overseas that had to do with peace, opportunities for peace. I guess what I would recall, how I perceived of my role was, you ever see that movie, or there was a book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Ever hear of that?
Yeah, classic.
Well, in the book, it turns out that the smartest beings on Earth were the white mice, the lab mice. And they were here it turns out that we learned that a bunch of the animals on Earth aren't really from Earth; they're extraterrestrials. But the smartest of all the smartest animal in all the universe are the little white lab mice, and they've been studying us by being under our observation and performing certain ways and seeing what our scientists infer, then performing something else, behaving with, and seeing what our scientists infer. So they were really the geniuses, and they were just clocking what our brain speed was like. In a way, that's what it was like. I was there under the microscope of the national security state and the intelligence state and worked for these people at the very top, but I was actually studying them from underneath. And I was doing this because I had this weird letter shown to me in 2006 that said I was supposed to spend my life penetrating and disrupting the deep state. And it was given to me it was shown to me by the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's a complicated story.
I mean,
was it easy to follow the movie, or is it too twisty turny?
No. It was easy to follow. It was great. No, it truly. I'm a film guy too, so in every aspect of the storytelling and the production value, it was great. The reason I want to watch it again is because I want to pick up on all the little subtleties that I know are in there. But the first time around, you're kind of getting big picture. I want to sort of like back this up though, because I think I'm getting you a little bit more now, because I understand, and in the movie, Flynn sort of validates the concept of that when he was at DIA. Yes, people like Patrick are assets. So, you know, he doesn't say it, but he says, you know, obviously it's in your movie saying it's possible, right?
In the book, he goes farther. If he wrote in the opening to my book, he wrote the introduction. And in that introduction, he comes out and says, look, when I was a 3-star general, I was aware of this guy, Patrick Byrne, did odd things for the U.S. government. It was that so he goes a little bit farther even in the book.
But I guess what I'm saying is, like, I want to get into your head, and now I think it makes sense. It's like, I understand you had a lot of access around the world, right? You speak multiple languages, you're well traveled, you're incredibly well educated, you've got the means to be places, so it makes sense that they would say, hey, this guy could be a great asset. But the flip side, now I get it. Are you an adventure seeker? Like, they came to you with this, you're like, wait, now I get to study them too?
Well, it started off for decades as is explained in the movie, the origin of how it started. I was a student in China in 1983, 84, and something happened there that drew me to the attention. Someone asked me to deliver a letter to the U.S. government. I did. And then 5 years later, the U.S. government got in touch with me and asked me to do something in Vietnam where there were no diplomatic relations, but there were the first talks concerning peace. And the Vietnamese had said, if your Americans are interested, in establishing peace, we'd like you to do something humanitarian just to show us. I was a graduate student in Stanford, and I was contacted by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who was just retiring, who knew about this letter I had delivered 5 years earlier. And he asked me out to spend a day with him. I spent a day, and then he asked me to go to Vietnam. I was studying graduate economics and development economics. Why don't you go, and they'll host you for a couple of weeks, come back and write me a letter, Patrick, on what we can do is say $300,000 to do the most good for Vietnam. So I went, the government hosted me for 2 weeks. I came back, I wrote what was basically a term paper of about 12 different ideas that for a little bit of money, the most good that could be done, and 12 different projects. And they did 11 of them. And that thus began this kind of strange relationship with the U.S. So I'm not a spy, I'm not a spook, I'm not stealing secrets or anything like that. I work for the CIA, and that was always kind of a red line before these events, that I did not have anything to do with the CIA. But there were opportunities that relate to peace that I occasionally, I don't want to overstate what I did, but I occasionally got tapped on the shoulder to go do something that had something to do with peace. And that was continued for the next several decades, until I got, or more than several decades, and almost 3 decades, until I got kind of, to be honest, Barack Obama elevated me to a position called national intelligence asset. But again, I emphasize I was not out stealing secrets, but it had to do with, at one point, somebody in the National Security Council gave me a task. And I said, this is 20 years ago. I said, why do you folks ask me to do these things? Or why don't you have your own people who do this? The guy said, Patrick, In this world, before certain kinds of people talk, other kinds of people need to talk. You're that other kind of person. I'm that other kind of person, whatever that means. Now you know what I know. No one ever explains this stuff better than me. I think I was expendable.
So wild. It's such a crazy story. So the letter you were talking about when you were in school in China that you had to deliver, is this relevant to that quote you said, where I think you said the first thing happened in college when you got to nudge the ox cart of peace? Is that this letter? Okay, so this wasn't at Dartmouth. This was when you were over. Was this China or?
In China, in Beijing. Well, I left Dartmouth after 2 years and went to China, and I spent a year and a half overseas. And this was in that period when I was a student in a Chinese university. I was an exchange student in a Chinese university, and I met a general from Laos, and I had a French girlfriend. So my days were speaking Chinese and my nights French, and I was out with her in public one evening in October, and this general, little muscular Asian man, came bounding up to us speaking perfect French because and we got talking. We had dinner 3 or 4 times, and he turned out to be a Laotian general. Laos is a country right next to Vietnam. They speak French like Vietnam. It was a French colony, and he was a guy who he was a paratrooper who committed a coup and threw out overturned his government, throughout the Vietnamese, the communists, the Pathet Lao, and throughout the CIA and our side, because he did not want Laos to be brought into what he saw was coming. This was the early 60s. And the CIA eventually deposed him. And so he was living by the mid 80s. He was living or the early 80s. He was living in the state guest house in Beijing. He had like 600 guerrilla soldiers loyal to him in Laos, and they were letting him operate from Beijing. And he just asked me after he got to know me 3 or 4 evenings, he asked me to take a letter to the embassy. So, and that's how it started.
Is this, I'm trying to just do timelines based on like our age difference. Was it be like late 80s or early 90s when you were in China?
Early 80s, 83, 84.
Early 80s. And then you said it was in 2010 when you uncovered some corruption that you're not going to talk about yet. So I won't ask you about that. So I'm just trying to put the timeline together. When did you have your personal awakening to the corruption everywhere?
Well, it started with Wall Street in like 2002 when I became a public company CEO, and I was fighting Wall Street 2002 to 2008 or 2009. But my awareness of this within, say, the deep state, that it wasn't just about the SEC and Wall Street, but it was more pervasive. That was more like 2010, 2011, when I was doing some things in the Middle East, and some things happened. And, things happen that don't make sense, and your handlers always tell you, well, you can't really know all the facts. It may not make sense from where you sit, but if you knew all the facts, it would make sense, but we can't tell you all the facts. And you accept that, a number of times, but then there were some things that just didn't make any sense no matter what the other facts were. And that's when I started really having some deep questions. And then when all this stuff, I already from 2012 forward, I had some deep questions about them. 2015, when I first came across Maria Butina, the day she landed in America, I met her and reported her, and their reaction was so out of character that's when I really got alerted that there was something goofy going on. The goofy thing going on was they were using her to set up the Russian collusion hoax. They already had settled on her probably in February of 2015. The official narrative is that all started in July of 2016, Operation Crossfire Hurricane. That's a big cover-up. The Durham report covers that forward, and it's correct in everything it covers. But what it leaves out is it really all started probably February of 2015, and there was about a 16-month period where they were setting up the Russian hoax, and they were using that girl Maria. They knew all about her. They were moving her around. They had me moving her around. They had me opening doors. They were using her to smudge up the Republican Party.
Patrick, this is something in our community we all talk about with each other, and we love to ask guests on the show is, what was your awakening moment? And, people are like, oh, it was 9/11 or it was COVID, or, you get answers. And I don't think I ever have or ever will again have someone say, oh, it was when I was doing, a secret assignment I can't tell you about in the Middle East.
Well, there was regarding Wall Street, there was a day, February 2015, a night where I was studying a cold, windy, blizzardy night in Utah. Had been studying certain things about Wall Street for about 2 months, and I suddenly clicked for me, this is all true, this could happen. As it regards this other stuff, the real penny dropping moment is that moment where I bribed Hillary Clinton that's depicted in the movie, and then got told I have to forget everything. And they explain why. And that's when I realized I was working for some bad guys, not my handlers, who I think were very good men. But I think we all got played, and we all found out on the same day. But I successfully bribed Hillary Clinton and was told I had to forget it. And it eventually was explained to me it's because she's going to be blackmailed by Obama and Brennan the whole time she's president. They're going to run her, and then she steps down, and Michelle's going to run. And Patrick, that's the plan.
So that really happened, where you got the guy in Azerbaijan to bribe her.
Azerbaijan bribed Hillary Clinton $18 million on January 14th, 2016. And I even explained in the movie how it happened. It's quickly dramatized. She was on, it took about 2 months to set it up and get her to agree. And she was in a hotel in Washington, D.C. on the 8th floor. She had a limousine at 9 a.m. The bagman was brought in at 8:30, went up to the 5th floor to her assistant's room. At 8:47, she leaves her bedroom like she's going out, taking the elevator to the lobby. She hops off at 5, goes into her assistant's room, had a meeting. 10-minute meeting with the bagman, accepted a bribe, came out, elevator, down, gone. She's gone by 9:02. It doesn't show up in her official records of January 14th, 2016, but that's how it was done. So, and then, but what was scary was immediately afterwards, I was told I had to forget it, that it had happened. And that didn't make much sense. And I went back to them a week or two later. And at this point, John Brennan, there was a person who's the go-between of Comey and Brennan, and 2 FBI agents, and all 3 were in the room. And they said the thing about, do you remember that thing about the Bunsen burner in the movie?
Yeah, yeah.
Those are actual words spoken. Patrick, at this point, President Obama has his people across the federal bureaucracy, but especially the DOJ.
Yeah.
You got to think of Hillary's going to be president for 8 years, and nothing's going to change that. But while she's president, so this is the first third of February 2016, these words were said, while she's president, there's going to be a Bunsen burner in the DOJ. And the bribes that you know about are going to sit on that Bunsen burner. The hand on the Bunsen burner is going to be one of Barack Obama's people.
Right.
If Hillary's a good girl and defends Obamacare, the flame stays low. If she thinks for herself and doesn't, follow orders, the flame gets turned up. That way, Barack Obama manages Hillary Clinton for 8 years. Then she's going to step down and Michelle's going to run. And Patrick, that's the plan.
This is crazy. And that was Project Snow Globe, right? That was
Operation Snow Globe.
Operation Snow Globe. I mean, these stories are they're just crazy. We never met before, but you and I were together at, we were standing near each other at the Ahern in Las Vegas, where I live. And I think it was the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association a couple years ago. And I was, I was there with Seth Keshel, and I went around to the side to take some video of whoever was on stage. And these 2 giant men were clearly special forces types are surrounding me. They just kind of walk up and block me, and I know what's happening. And I'm like, what's going on? And I look, and you were like 2 feet from me. So I got within the zone. So I got boxed off fairly quickly. So I didn't get a chance to say hello. But, back then I knew that you were a very successful and wealthy person who was doing good for our cause. But I honestly had no idea about this secret life, and just learning about it now, it's mind-blowing. What was his name? James Bamford. You're not Spider-Man. To me, you're a combination of Tony Stark, James Bond, and don't take this one wrong, Hannibal Lecter, but not the cannibal part, just the philosophical, educated, cultured genius.
Well,
You're not like any of the other kids in the playground, sir.
Well, it was an interesting life for many years. It had layers after layers. I'm sure there won't be any of that in my life anymore, and I'm just fine with that. But what was the strangest aspect was that the Senate Judiciary Committee became aware of this life in 2005. And they had me, the only spying I've really done is spying against the government. They had me going around the government and reporting back to them where I thought the corruption was. And after a year of that, they sent me on this mission where they said it's depicted in the movie and it's all real. There was a letter and there's a mission, and they say there's some kind of corrupt force taking over the U.S. government. It's our job to stop it. We can't stop it, but you're going to stop it for us. And here's this letter that says you can't be prosecuted. And so since that day in 2006, I've always there were many times I wanted to drop out and many times I wanted to stop this. But I always felt there were times that kept me alive. I was in hospitals very sick sometimes. And I felt like, gee, I can't die. I haven't, 300 million Americans asked me to do something and I haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet. And then that's really, I would love to have left after 2020 and never been seen again.
Yeah, I bet.
I've blown most of my fortune, but I felt like, gee, who gets asked to do this? And it didn't seem like anyone else was around going to do it. So I did it. Wait till you find out what I've been doing in the last 2 years overseas. I went overseas and didn't come back to America until just days ago.
Are you in hiding right now? I saw that somewhere that you're in hiding. Is that why you've got the brick wall?
Yeah, that's why. I'm just keeping things fair. I have good security, but I'm keeping things. I've been over in Qatar and Dubai for months and months, for 6 months. I've been really the last 2 years practically. I've been out of the country other than about 10 or 15 days. And that was because, Venezuela has a $25 million bounty on my head.
I mean, and you were there, but you were actually in the country when that bounty was on you, right?
I wasn't in Venezuela. I was in Ghana when I became aware. Somebody tried to kidnap me in Ghana. And the police, fortunately, intervened, and the police were looking out for me. And when they questioned the people, it came out that there was this bounty on my head. And then other people got involved to let me know it was a Nigerian warlord but they even had a hole for me in the ground in Burkina Faso. They were a different country. They were going to transport me. And it all has to do with Venezuela had a national election on July 28th. And normally their elections run like this: 7 million people vote against them, 2 million vote for them, and then they stuff 5.5 million ballots. And they have this secret software tool that lets them stuff ballots. And that secret software tool worked. It worked up through testing on July 27th, Saturday, until 12:01 Sunday morning, July 28th. And then that tool stopped working, and they were not able to, on the day of the election, it stopped working. They could not stuff their 5.5 million ballots. They freaked out. Venezuela canceled all its normal transparency, which is fake anyway, as the ballots come in because their side's being stuffed. They canceled it all. They just came out the next morning and said, we won 51-49, take it or leave it, and arrested 2,000. Well, they then did some forensic analysis on that tool that didn't work the day of the election, and they discovered that it had been hacked. And they evidently have come to the conclusion that I know something about these facts, Mark. And there was in August 10th, they put a $25 million bounty on me.
I mean, it's so crazy. You've touched on everything. We didn't even go to that one yet about the actual digital election fraud in the U.S. And you talked about, I think you called them dolphin speakers.
Yes.
People who speak in dolphin language. I was a techie, so maybe I was a dolphin speaker at one point, but I've never heard it put that way. Did you coin that term?
No, a guy from within the government used that term with me once. Dolphin speakers are the guys, because when the techies get together and they speak, it's like listening to dolphins squeak to each other, to most human beings.
So what I'm getting is so you had this first letter when you were in China and young, and then after that, you became someone who was sort of like a trusted asset. And then other departments and agencies were like, hey, we need you too. And it just kind of became a cycle for your life. Yeah.
And eventually National Security Council people after 9/11, I was a guy that they knew they could task, and I would go and do things. I was known for doing extreme things to accomplish whatever I was asked to accomplish. And that got back to people. And eventually I got promoted. And in fact, I think that what happened was, to be honest, in 2006, I was asked if I would mind being moved into sort of a high-speed, under command of a high-speed cell. in the national security establishment? I said, sure. The woman who took me to lunch and asked me that came out later, 6 or 7 years later. She emerged as one of John Brennan's 2 proteges. I think that from 06 forward, I was being used by John Brennan in some matters that I thought were domestic or that were overseas and peace related. But I think at the end of the day, so I always had the red line. I had nothing to do with the CIA, but it turns out the CIA, John Brennan may have been pulling some strings since 06 forward. So I know a lot of things I'm not supposed to know. Let me just put that alone.
I know I'm already thinking about the questions I want to ask you, but I know I can't because I know you know certain
not in the
things.
movie, I'm not
I
gonna
know
go.
you know certain things. You're not in hiding right now, and you're not still alive for no reason. So I
No,
get,
I'm in hiding. I'm not public about where I am. I'll put it.
no, but I get what that means. You know what I mean? Someone had to be protecting you this whole time, is what I'm getting at. Like, when did you? So I'm thinking back to this meeting with you and the Men in Black. And then I've got a couple of questions from viewers here too. Just want to let them know I see them, and I'll get to them in a second. So you had this meeting with the Men in Black. They gave you the Bunsen burner talk about Hillary, and you knew that you were doing some. They were requesting you to do some stuff for Brennan and Obama. At what point, before or after this, did you like fully know that those 2 guys, Obama and Brennan, were not good guys?
Were bad. It was that same talk, because when they finished the Bunsen burner talk, they said, so now you understand, Patrick, what we mean when we say you've got to wipe every trace of this from that memory of yours. It's a matter of life or death.
Yeah.
I said it. It's a matter of life. So they were threatening my life. Once I knew I was threatening my life, I knew that that's not standard.
That's not standard. And you didn't know they were corrupt before that. That was the talk.
What I had was a lot of things that didn't add up and a lot of pieces that seemed odd. But again, they always tell you just don't know all the facts. If you know all the facts, you understand why this was handled this way or that was handled that way. But when I had people, tell me that Hillary was not going to be prosecuted for this thing we'd set her up, and B, that they were threatening my life if I didn't keep quiet about it all. That told me, okay, there's some gangsters who've taken over here. I actually didn't think it was Obama. I thought it was like some people who were using these names with me.
Oh, you didn't know at the time. You thought, okay, someone's just dropping their names for street cred
to get me to do this stuff. That it was somebody in there's places you can go in the national security community that aren't on any org chart, and that maybe this was one of those kinds of people, and they'd gotten hold of my chain of command, and I was being jerked to do these. I thought that's more than likely what was at the back, but it turns out, no, it was Brennan and Comey and Obama. And so when I created that whole aggravated rape and murder thing, I didn't know who that was going to go to, but I knew it was going to go to somebody in the depths of the deep state. And someone was either going to have to pull the plug on everything we were doing, or to continue, someone was going to have to sign off on the aggravated rape and possible murder of a girl they knew was innocent. That never actually happened, but they didn't know that. It was the most beautiful sting. And remember, the FBI taught me the legal theory surrounding stings and how it works, and how there's got to be predicate acts that establish a prior disposition, blah, 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 blah. Well, I had all that. And so I just made this up. And I tricked Barack Obama. Barack Obama signed off on the rape and murder of an innocent girl.
Every time I think you can't blow my mind anymore, you do. Again, like if I asked the people who are watching this show right now, when did you wake up to, the corruption of Obama and Brennan? We're going to get some pretty standard answers about, things. No one's going to say, oh, I started to suspect them when they threatened my life.
Yeah. And I guess I gave them the benefit of the doubt much longer than I should have, because I knew of some fishy things from 2010, 2012 forward, but I kept on saying it can't be Brennan. It can't be Obama. There's some people buried in the system somewhere. It was only 2016 early 2016 that I realized this really is Brennan and Comey and Obama that are pulling all these strings.
This is blowing my mind so much. And you had mentioned your chain of command, thinking it was someone somewhere who would hijack that. There was a part in the movie when you talked about when Peter Strzok was testifying to Trey Gowdy, and that your recognition was, oh, that's my chain of command right there. Walk us through that. That's crazy.
That was around July 8th, 2018 and that famous congressional thing where Radcliffe and Gowdy are grilling Peter Strzok, and they also grilled Andy McCabe and a few others in the week before that. And these people gave such horrible answers. It was clear they had misused their positions in the FBI to do this, that, and the other thing. That was all clear. But, and I made that determination. I was in Atlantic City. I'd given a speech. I made that determination. I was watching it that night on my iPad. And I realized what horrible guys here in the FBI. And then I started paying attention to their titles. And I had been told the titles of my chain of command, and those titles matched what I had been told. And I suddenly realized, holy cow, these are these horrible guys are my bosses. And that's why I got these kooky instructions 2 years ago. It's because this guy was over it. So that all happened the night that Peter Strzok testified to Congress.
I mean, we all remember when the lovers' texts were released. It was a huge deal. We knew it was going to come back later, but for you to be in a position where you're like, it meant something totally different to you, and it's just mind blowing. Real quick, if we can,
I'll give you. And one of the most significant thing about that was once I watched it, I also knew somewhere in America there's some people in a room who are following everything I do, who are saying Byrne just put all the pieces together. I knew from that moment forward that they knew that I had just put all the pieces together.
I mean, I almost feel like, and tell me if I'm out of line here, I feel like there were two sets of rooms that were watching you. One that, you were a threat to, so they had to monitor you, and the other who knew you were a secret Trojan horse for them and wanted to keep you alive. Do you think about that, or am I?
No, I think that it turns out I was long. No, I was out there on my own. But that's why I went to Congress. I went to Congress the next morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. Got on a plane, got to Congress, and I went and found David Nunes' committee, and I found John Ratcliffe, and I started downloading to John Ratcliffe. And he had a guy from the special operations community, and they were able to check, and they were able to establish that 25%, they told me, of what I told them, they were able to confirm. Well, in my book, they should have then listened to the other 75%. Instead, they stalled. They approached it like lawyers rather than like people who knew their country was burning down.
That's wild. That's wild. I want to ask you more about Obama, but first I want to just acknowledge Abe Froman. Thank you for the $17 Rumble rant. And Patrick, if you want to answer this, Abe asks, will the world ever know the truth about the 2020 election, and will we ever see justice?
Yes, the world will know, and I think it'll be here before summertime. I know the truth. I know the truth about it. It's just a matter of we have gotten everything unscrambled. It's just a matter at this point of the paperwork to go through. But all the truth, everything has been surfaced, the people involved, everything. There's actually already people flipped. There's already people flipped who are talking. So
you think before the summer?
Yeah, before the summer to be revealed.
That's very quick.
Maybe faster.
And I also want to thank Vision Dancer for the $20 Rumble rant. And maybe you know what they're referring to, Patrick. They said, please share what you can about your new project. And thank you for all you've done and survived it all.
My new project. What is my new project? You're gonna have to remind my new project.
Maybe they're talking about maybe they're talking about the movie. So let me put that up. Enemy Within docuseries.com. Cannot recommend it enough. Literally, go buy it and watch it tonight. You won't be able. It's 3 episodes. You won't be able to stop after the first one. It's that good.
Well, that's very kind of you.
So Obama. Okay.
Obama, yes.
When you learned that Obama and Brennan were scheming to control Hillary, I think during all of our awakenings, there's a point when we realize there's a uniparty, and we realize that there's handlers, like Soros's and others behind the scenes. And we start to think that all these people are on the same team. But your revelation, clearly Obama and Hillary, which we now know are not on the same team. Do you have any insights, or can you share anything about what you think is upstream of the Obama-Brennan machine?
Yeah, they're not on. There's an intramural squabble. They're on the same Democratic team, but there's intramural squabble. The Clintons had the Democratic Party wired from the 90s forward. Obama is really a usurper in their point of view. They
Okay.
were sure he was going to win. She was going to win the 2008 election. He came in and usurped it. Incidentally, it's going to turn out that that was stolen. The Iowa primary, Democratic primary in 2008 was stolen for Barack Obama against Hillary Clinton using these machines. And that's what launched him. That big breakthrough for Obama came because if you go back, he won the Iowa primary. That was stolen. But they hate each other. But Clinton represents to me like old-fashioned Democrat plus corruption. Obama is an absolute Marxist. Obama, Susan Rice, they hate the U.S. They want to collapse the U.S. Hence, he wanted to fundamentally transform the U.S. What an arrogant thing to say. You know,
Right.
who gets elected to? Nobody elected him to fundamentally transform the country. So they're different wings, but at this point they're in it together because they're at some point in the last few years they decided to be in it together because if Trump came back, they're both screwed. But the real relationship is Biden Clinton. They've been in they have formed a molecule of corruption for about 32 years. They go back, and the corrupt deep state really evolved around the two of them, around the Clintons and the Bidens. And then Obama came in, and as I say, it's going to turn out his 2008 Iowa primary against Hillary Clinton was rigged. And he had this surprise victory, and that's what took him off to the races. And they didn't have to rig, and we have the people who were involved in all that now. We really, I know what I'm talking about. So Americans are going to find out that for 20 years our elections have been bent, and China has been calling the shots, and it's been bent in order to. They knew they could just make us communist overnight. It's been coming up from the school board level and the prosecutors and the judges and the mayors. And it's gradually worked up to Congress and governors and senators, and then the presidency in 2020.
It's so unbelievable. Real quick, thank you, Rambo, in the chat for the $10 Rumble Rant. Appreciate you, brother. I want to ask you a question from a quote that was in part 3. Because I've been singing your praises, so to give you a chance to answer the hard questions. And this is a quote from your docuseries by Charles Spurgeon. It says, "Beware of no man more than yourself. We carry our own worst enemies within us." And I love that quote. So what would you say your worst enemy is?
Well, I'm very duty driven. Ultimately, everything I did, I wanted to check out of this years and years and years ago. I felt an obligation to my country. I felt an obligation, and I had made this very specific promise to this set of senators, so I felt I could not really back out. There's a similar quote from William Burroughs. He said, "Con men of the world, beware, there's one mark you cannot con, and that is the mark within." So never, anyway, I'm probably my own worst enemy in some respects. That I got very, I took it personally, especially once they started threatening my life. They had to be out of their minds. It told me, that's when I say it didn't come through the normal chain of command, because the normal chain of command has shrinks and people like that who would explain that, hey, if you threaten this guy's life, it's not gonna be productive. And once they threatened my life, that's when I also knew that I was working, that there was no accommodation that could be made them, that these were enemies of the country if they were doing business that way.
I got a question. With the D-class and the revelations that are obviously coming, are you going to be able to tell more of your life story with this clandestine stuff, or is a lot of that still going to have to stay under lock and key?
There's no reason to make any more of it public. I thought this would never come public in my lifetime. 50 years after I was gone, it would come public. But I don't see any reason to make more of that part of my life public. I just have made enough public, barely enough that I can tell the story that the public needed to be aware of. And that was my goal.
Well, the only reason I would want it to be public is because I want to hear the story. I feel like it's going to be a great movie.
Well, maybe someone else will make it, or a TV series someday. But it is funny. There were years in my life where Overstock began to feel like a cover job and a cover story. And this other life was taking over my energies and activities. They really work you hard sometimes.
We got a comment in the chat from a friend, Rambo, who says tomorrow's going to be a blast, and he's referring to Kash Patel's confirmation hearing, and Rambo, myself, and Dave from News Treason are going to be covering that live. What do you what do you think? I mean, did you watch the RFK Jr. hearing today?
I watched an hour of it. He's good.
He's incredible. I mean, earth-shattering revelations are coming to humanity, right? They're not going to be able to stop RFK and Kash, in my opinion. And all they're doing by trying is outing themselves as criminals and shills for big pharma.
How about Pocahontas today, trying to get him to promise that you will not sue pharmaceutical companies?
I mean, you can't make this up. The woman who's only Bernie Sanders gets more money than she does from big pharma, and she's gonna go up there and beg him not to sue big pharma.
It's embarrassing.
It's almost like she's got a white hat script. Why would she ever say that unless she's being misled intentionally, or she's just that dumb? Because admit you're guilty without admitting you're guilty. Please don't sue big pharma.
Right.
What do you think could happen? Especially, like, I'm going to trust you because you seem to know things, that the 2020 revelation will come before the summer. You know, we're following the awakening of people, and they're all at different stages. And obviously the majority of people are in the process now. Most of them aren't where, you and I and these viewers are, but there needs to be some things so that the masses don't, react crazy, protest, violence when they learn it. What kind of revelations do you think we could have between now and the summer that will prime people for the big news that's coming?
Well, the political news is going to be really showing that the whole Obama, and I'm not an Obama hater. I didn't vote for him another time, but when he was elected, I was like I took orders with no problem. People are going to discover that they're really come to understand there's a Bolshevik overthrow of our country that's been going on. He's been at the center of it. Behind him, though, he's himself just a puppet. He's got puppet strings from Susan Rice to Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris. But behind his puppet strings is Obama. Behind him is George Soros and the WEF and Klaus Schwab and that whole world. That's one thing they'll learn. Another thing they'll learn is that our 20 years in 72 countries, elections have been being flipped. China is the ultimate chairman of the board of the operation. The technology truly is out of Venezuela. That's dominates in all our systems. And those elections get rigged out of Serbia. There's an office in Serbia, and they've got 15 different ways of cheating in elections. 14 of them are on the ground ways that I'm sure you've been talking about for 4 years. But the 15th way, at the end of the day, the polls close, and then they come in from Serbia, and they create a virtual machine in the RAM of the county election server, and they create any outcome they want, and then poof, disappear. And there's very little trace of anything unless you do a real forensic dive on the hard drive. And people are going to learn that through that technique and techniques like that, the whole arc of Western history has been bent for 20 years. And the suicidal course we're on is being done by politicians who we have not elected. 72 nations have had elections rigged. So the whole arc of history is being corrected. And it's so Chinese. The Chinese, Sun Tzu said the greatest victory is to win without fighting. That fight was shot, and they will have collapsed the West if this is not exposed.
I had a great conversation with General Stephen Quast a couple weeks ago on this show. We talked a lot about China. He's an incredible human being. And like you, there's so many questions I know he knows the answer to, but I can't ask. But we talked about, he was talking about China being the enemy in terms of this current space race. But then we kind of got real about like who the enemy really is, whereas China's, just another proxy for this globalist cabal. What level of true world peace do you see coming in Trump's term? Because I think there's, kinetic warfare is over. And I think a new level of peace comes, but am I being hopeful, or do you see that coming?
Oh, we have a chance at it. We had lost before. We had lost. And China has plans to occupy us and turn us into a farm. And that's all in their national security literature. And they thought they were there by 2028, maybe 2027. After 2020, they issued deeds in China. Every nice home in America has a deed issued to some general or colonel or CCP guy. They thought they were occupying by 2028. Now that if we can get ourselves unstuck here, a real discussion about peace and what the world could look like could be had. So we really could have peace now. I do think that China's at the apogee of its power. It has to make its moves right now, because with each succeeding year, its relative power is going to fade.
Yeah. I honestly still pinch myself that we're living through this. I became a truth seeker on 9/11. I lived in New York. I lost a good friend in the tower, so I was, very glued to the events. My degrees are in engineering, so it didn't take long for me to start questioning narratives. But, after 25 years, you sort of say, all right, corruption won. We're past the dark side of the moon. And so to be here now is pretty incredible.
It is amazing.
I don't want to keep you too long. We didn't discuss time. Are you okay on time? Anytime you want to jump, just let me know. But I know that your opinions on Trump have changed over the years, right? I think you said you see him as a blowhard, but now you're.
Well, I didn't vote for him. I never voted Republican or Democrat just on principle. That way I could take orders from either president. So I always held out.
Oh, wow.
That's why I've always held out publicly as a libertarian, in part because I had this other life. That said, I agreed with 95% of what Trump had to say when he came. His style was not mine. And not attractive to me. And that, as I say in the movie, I'm like a Northern Yankee. And so we're about being plain and not boastful and things like this. And his style threw me off. But once he became president, within days, I started to swing around to his side because I saw the way they were crucifying him. And it seemed like an information operation rather than based on facts. So it was, and I've come to really like him. I've come to really love the guy, frankly. And I also think here in this second term, I think he's changed. He has evolved. Don't you think he's more mature? He's not doing the silly stuff he was doing 4 years ago. He's not, I think it turns out 2/3 of the stuff they criticized him for was made up. But about 1/3 of it was true. He did, and he's learned not to do that embarrassing stuff.
I mean, I can see that. And obviously, how could you have lived through what he's lived through and not learned a lot of lessons that change you and grow? But, I'm just going to be honest, like I kind of come at it from the viewpoint, and you're free to disagree, that, a lot of the things he did early on were carefully curated to create the attention. Bull in the China shop, mean tweets. I don't think that was a man who couldn't control himself tweeting. I think that was a plan to get all eyes on it. So love him or hate him, you can't look away. And then he makes a tweet calling Adam Schiff a pencil neck or a watermelon head. And CNN and MSNBC and the whole slew puts the tweet up to mock him. But he's planting the seed that Adam Schiff is a name you're going to all need to know sometime soon. So he's getting them to do his bidding for them under the guise of mean tweets. At least that's what I think. I don't know
some of that. I think he knows how to play the angles with the media better than anyone who's ever come along. He knows how to make them do the work for him. But he also did some things that were not. The time he looked like he made fun of a reporter who had cerebral palsy or something. He made a few unforced errors like that.
Well, that one was he would do a thing where he did his hands to make fun of someone being stupid, and it was a bad decision to make that, but he did it for a couple years, and then one time he did the same gesture to somebody who was disabled, and it was really a bad mistake. Okay, so you're right, he probably learned not to do stuff like that.
And even and of course the good people on both sides turns out to be basically a hoax. The fact that
complete hoax.
he made clear that he was not talking about white supremacists and such. Yeah, and I thought so. Really, when he came in and I knew an information operation was going on because when he came in last time, he said, the deal on NATO is we're all supposed to contribute 2.0% of GDP we're going to spend on defense. And these Italy and Germany, they're spending 1.2%, 1.3%. And here's the US, we're spending 4%. And this isn't fair. Get your spending up. Well, that was a very reasonable thing to say. Nothing wrong with saying that. But the press treated it as this, oh my God, Donald Trump doesn't understand the importance of NATO. Oh, doesn't he? And I realized, gee, this isn't fair. That's not, they were. So I definitely like him. I get a kick out of him.
What did you think on the first day when he started? He signed executive orders all day. First of all, he literally was on stage at the arena there, the Capital One Arena, and signing like a rock concert, but signing executive orders. Like, who else could sit up on stage? He signed them all day. Like, what was your feeling seeing him do that? Because I think it was like 11 o'clock and I'm in bed and they're still rolling them out. Like, what was your favorite ones that you didn't expect?
Finally, a president doing what he promises.
Yeah, there you go.
All
the above.
I think what's key is this stuff, believe it or not, about JFK and MLK and RFK, because what I learned from Flynn in the last 4 years, the mighty Flynn, is that the truth is worth 100 army divisions, and let the truth do the work for you. And there's going to be all this pushback on the changes that need to be made. Well, instead of being in a tug of war with a deep state about it, just expose the truth. Who did kill Kennedy? If that was elements within our government, we need to know that. And that truth will do the work for him rather than big tugs of war with Congress.
You think that information is going to be in those D classes? I mean, you don't think the CIA muddied up those documents long before they classified them? Poison pilled them, disappeared some of them, whatever they had to do?
We'll see.
I mean, I think let's say the 9/11 and the MLK and the JFK D classes come and we don't get the answers we want. I mean, this would be like the OJ investigation on steroids times a million. If they opened up investigations into these things and we got to follow along, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of theater. And if we're going to keep people interested in politics, they need a hook. And following the JFK investigation, modern day, would be kind of crazy.
Well, the JFK, so would the MLK. I want to know, did the FBI have something to do with murdering MLK? Or would that be sad?
Yeah, and I saw some stuff going around on X where they were saying bad things about MLK, like he's not the guy you think. And when I saw those going around, I immediately thought, okay, some really bad information about the people, like maybe FBI, who knows, who killed him is going to come out. So they're trying to get ahead of it with their disinformation campaign.
Although it may be the case that he had a personal life that was a little bit adventuresome, but you know what? I'm kind of over that. People, you know what? Everybody in DC, everybody in power. An economist there said to me once, Patrick, they're all megalomaniacs. They're all crazy. They're all perverts. They're all cheat. That can't be your filter, because if it is, nobody in politics is a choir boy. So, and who cares? And anyway, at some point there's a statute of limitations on that stuff. So I'm afraid, I hope there isn't anything too unflattering about MLK.
Yeah, I hope so too. Interesting. So one of my favorite scenes in The Enemy Within docuseries is when you're with General Flynn, Sidney Powell, and I forgot who the other person was, and you get an audience with Trump in 2020, right after you guys team up and are going to present ways to handle the election fraud.
Right.
This is the most incredible scene. I've got some questions about it, but first, like, how did that happen?
Well, what happened was we became aware that there was an argument that President Trump was not being exposed to from his own people. And the argument was Barack Obama himself had signed an executive order that says if foreigners interfere in an election, the president has a range of options, from a light investigation to a serious investigation, the presidential commission, this, that. He can even rerun the election if he wants. And the government itself, our own government, in October, November, and December of 2020, came out and said, we're being hacked. We're being hacked straight through the toes. And there's hacks of the election equipment, and there's hacks of Iran has hacked one state successfully. They're going after other states, and there's other nation states involved. And so our own government was putting out these statements. So we wanted to make an argument for him that, look, based on what Barack Obama signed, and based on these statements from our own government, not theories of vote flipping from space, not South Korean jets, statements from our own government, you have the authority to do anything, Mr. President. We're suggesting you do a very quick and dirty investigation. And we almost had him so that was our goal. And we knew no one was pointing this out to him. So I said, I got frustrated on the night of Friday, December 18th. And I called over to a couple of White House staffers who had been saying, hey, Pat, anytime you want to tour the White House, let us know. And so I called over and said, well, you've been saying I could have a tour. How about I come over in 20 minutes? I'll have a tour. And they thought it was kind of odd time. It was Friday evening at 6. But they said yes. They meet me at the gate. And I went upstairs and I told in the hotel, I told Sydney and Mike, this is what's going on. No, I told them that we had a meeting at the White House. And I probably kind of gave them the impression that it was with Trump, but I didn't say Trump. I just said, we got an important meeting at the White House, but we have to leave right away. It's just come together. I've got it arranged. So they left and we all went over, them thinking we were going in to see Trump. And we got in and we got waved in at the gates because you got General Flynn and you got these two staffers on the other side calling, but then we all got in and it became clear to General Flynn and Sydney that that was all we had, was an appointment with a couple of staffers, not with the president. I'll never forget, for a split second, General Flynn's eyes behind his glasses looked at me and they got big for a split second. And then he was immediately, the general, he stepped, okay, you're here, we're going to walk here, you come behind me. And then we spent sort of an hour meandering through the different office buildings and stuff to get up to striking distance of the Oval Office. And then I walked down the hall to the Oval Office and stood outside the door until Trump walked by, and he saw me and he did a double take. And that's how it all started. And that's how it was done. But it was General Flynn was wonderful. He was smooth. He's a smooth operator, let me tell you.
I've got to meet him a few times, become good friends with his son. And first of all, what an incredible family. But when you're talking to General Flynn, you just know there's so many levels going on behind what he's saying or behind the expressions. Like, he's just a master.
He keeps his cards close to his chest.
Really close. So in that scene, the lawyers were talking, and then they said to you, because you suggested that the military, or maybe it was the National Guard, could get involved, and they said no uniforms. And then Trump said it again to you, right? He said no uniforms, meaning we don't want the American people to see soldiers. Why do you think that was so important to him at that time?
Well, there's a long tradition that you don't want uniforms around an election. That's a general rule. I was saying that we need to do we were selling them on a quick investigation that could have been done. We even said on paper it says 2 weeks, but the truth is in 2 or 3 days, we're going to have our answer. And it required just going in and imaging hard drives in 6 different places. And it could be DHS, it could be FBI. The document was written for the DHS to do it. But I brought up the possibility of using that the National Guard had cyber teams that we could use, just little 3-man cyber teams, staple a U.S. Marshal to it, and send them into each of these 6 places to make an image of the hard drive, take back to government headquarters. And I said that because the marshals work for the courts, and the National Guard are military, and there are citizen soldiers, there are brothers and sisters, the people at work, and it was a crisis of confidence in the system. And so I'm not sure if the FBI or DHS had investigated. I told the president that that's going to really solve the public trust. But if we have National Guard come in with U.S. Marshals and make these copies, I think it's a quicker way to inject trust. And he twice said, no, we can't have any. Well, his lawyer said no uniforms. The public will go nuts if they see any uniforms.
Yep.
he sided with them. Now, I will point out that Joe Biden in the election of 2022 in 14 states used these cyber teams from the National Guard. And nobody freaked out and said, oh, my God, we're using uniforms around an election. But if Trump had done it, they would have.
Well, what's interesting is having just watched your movie a couple days ago, and that jumping out to me, no uniforms, is that Trump just used the military twice this week. He sent them into California to turn the water on that Newsom won't. He stopped them diverting the water to the ocean so their reservoirs can fill up and they'll have water in their fire hydrants. He used the military, and then within the same 24-hour period, he sent the military to our southern border when there was that shoot off with border agents in the cartel. So something has changed dramatically between now and then, because then, I thought your plan was quite rational that you gave to the president, and it was pretty clear that doing things like that could have stopped the fraud, but they said no uniforms, and now he's not even in office a week, and he's used the military domestically twice.
Well, here's something I've never publicly said, but it is the case that we moved through a doorway at one point together, and it was just the two of us. And he's one thing he said, I've shared in the past, was if you come back and in a few days you don't think that you're finding proof that this has been stolen, I will concede immediately. I will have no trouble doing that. But the other thing he said, which I've never shared publicly, was he said, if I get a second term, it's going to be completely different. It's going to be completely different, Pat. Meaning I've put up with these chihuahuas for 4 years biting at my ankles, and that's not what the next term is going to be. So it's good to know he's gone in there in a muscular fashion, and he's using the military this way. I think that this whole thing I think the whole thing should be moved into the military. I think that this should be moved into military trials. They have ways of doing things in 3 hours. They can try, battlefield exigencies. They could. We can't rely on our normal court system. It's obviously we're going to be able to prove, or it's going to be proven within months, that it was corrupt, that it missed the overthrow of the U.S. Republic in 2020, that it's what they've thrown in our face. Oh, 61 judges looked at this and they didn't see anything. That's going to become our argument once it's all laid out and proven and confessed to, that what really happened. It's going to be our point to say, how corrupt is the system? The system's so corrupt that now that you see what really happened, 60 judges looked at this and they said, no, nothing wrong with any of this. That's how corrupt it is. So that it becomes a point in our favor.
I mean, you make a good point. I mean, in those instances, military is the only way. This might sound a little out there to you, but a lot of the people watching and sort of in our movement wonder what level of military involvement there's been since his first term. You're familiar with, continuity of government.
Yeah, I don't buy that the theory that Trump has really secretly been in charge. I don't buy
No, I'm not saying I don't buy that. I know that's some people's. I don't think, Trump was secretly the president, but continuity of government and devolution is very real, right? In the event of a nuclear war and DC was taken out and 95% of our leaders were gone, the government needed a way to function. So you create these sort of autonomous divisions with military intelligence around the country to keep things running. And you could argue that when the election was stolen from foreign influence in 2020, DC was occupied territory and captured, and therefore some form of continuity of government would have been triggered.
I don't know. I don't know anything about that. I think that what we are seeing are two different parts of the government. What we've been seeing is a war between two different parts of the government, and one of those parts is the senior executive service.
Right.
And the other part is basically military based. So I think that theory may echo the truth. It may not be the truth, but it echoes the truth.
Do you think the SES is toast at this point?
I think that Trump should fire every one of them. I think they should all leave. The entire SAS should walk off. Should get a letter saying goodbye, and they just walk off. And we start building again. And I say that even though I know some people in it who are very good people from both sides. I know Republicans and Democrats in there. But I think the whole thing has become this embedded group. It's turning into something like the Hunger Games, where people see what used to happen was there used to be this taboo. If you were a political appointee, you served your time, helped your country for 4 years or 8 years, and then you went off. There was a process called ram specking in, that you could ram spec in, that was legalized, I think, around World War II, that someone could be a political appointee and create a job in their department. So you have the lifetime people in the department, but then the commissars, the political appointees, get appointed by each new president. That person could open up a job within the bureaucracy that's under them and then apply for the job and take it. Well, if they do that, they end up in the upper reaches of these bureaucracy without ever having worked their way up. There's some Brown University sociology major whose dad gave the right donations, and at age 30, they got appointed a second deputy assistant secretary of something, and now they get in that, and then they ram spec in and they burrow their way in. They ended up, we have several 1,000 or 2,000 of such people across the federal bureaucracy. Most of them are Democrats, but not all. They're Republicans too, and it's just bad institutional design, because you have people who have worked their way up in government in these departments doing good things, and then you get some political flunky appointed at the top who then digs himself in, so he's not part of what comes and goes. They got to get rid of the SES, and they got to get rid of everyone who's ever ram spec'd themselves in, and that's probably another 500. And it's probably 400 Democrats and 100 Republicans. And like I say, I know some of them, they're talented people. They're not bad, but they need to be moved out, and then that will also create huge promotion from within. As they get moved out, we'll be able to fill from within and just get rid of the political class, turn it over, and backfill from within, from seasoned career people. That's what they need to do.
I feel like most people who have so many academic degrees in philosophy don't wind up in the positions you're in. Like, it's incredible. Where did your love from philosophy come? Because you've studied a lot.
Well, I studied a lot. I had cancer when I was 22, and I spent my 20s. I had cancer 3 times, and I spent 3 years in hospitals and another 3 years convalescing. So that probably is where it all. I mean, I was a philosophy major before that. I wanted to think about the big questions of life.
Who was the first philosopher when you were young that you glommed onto?
Plato and Socrates. But then I quickly switched. I became interested in Buddhism and the Buddha, and who I see as a source of great wisdom. But also I had a very typical, or I'd say a Catholic upbringing that was, for Catholics, unusual in that I learned the Bible better than most Catholics. Catholics don't really generally study the Bible. I studied the Bible when I was a kid and learned it pretty well.
What about today? Is there a particular philosopher, modern or classical, that
Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman.
Milton Friedman.
Well, Thomas Sowell is the greatest. Thomas Sowell is a national treasure. It's amazing. Do you know Thomas Sowell? The work?
No, I'm not familiar with the work.
He's an economist. He studied under Milton Friedman. He himself is 93 now. He's African American, so people sometimes.
Oh, Sowell. So is that how you say it? So Thomas Sowell. That's how I say. Yeah. Oh, I'm very familiar with him. He's incredible.
Oh, he's the greatest.
I love everything he says. His quotes are some of the best quotes.
Yeah, his books are. He is a scholar. Like, if you were to teach people how to be a scholar, you could take any of his books on philosophy, on history, on economics, and he is the most perfect scholar. It's just like a scholar from 100 years ago knew how to be a scholar. And our universities don't emphasize that so much anymore.
Have you ever met him?
I actually did. Milton Friedman arranged for me to have lunch with him once.
You got to tell me. I've been posting his quotes on my Instagram and Facebook stories for years, because he's one of a kind.
He's wonderful. I was promised a 90-minute lunch. He showed up to the minute, on time. We sat. We had a wonderful conversation. He did most of the talking for 90 minutes. And at 90 minutes, he looked at his watch. He said, "Oh, got to go. Thank you." Got up and left. He's famously withdrawn.
Oh, really?
Some might say shy. Maybe it's not shyness. He just doesn't. He never really liked the whole academic scene. He doesn't hang. He usually would come into Stanford at midnight and work in the library in the middle of the night, so he didn't have to meet people. He's almost not a shut-in, but he's very averse to meeting people, and he doesn't suffer fools. Let me tell you, he doesn't grade on a curve.
That's incredible.
But Milton was also Milton and I were friends.
Oh, you were
7 or 8 years of his life, and that was an extraordinary experience being friends with Milton Friedman.
I can't even imagine. It sounds like Thomas was what we call in this community an autist. Very brilliant, but the parts of the mind that are adapted for social interaction aren't necessarily fine-tuned.
Yeah, he doesn't really. Life's short. He doesn't care what other people think about anything. He's such a good thinker, such a good scholar.
And then I just got to ask you, just you're maybe a decade older than me, but we're both still unmarried men. And what's your take on Nietzsche and a little thus spoke Zarathustra?
Well, I was a big fan of Nietzsche as an undergraduate, and I quote Nietzsche.
We all were, right?
I quote Nietzsche a lot. He was the great writer and funny, and among philosophers, one of the greatest of writers. I came to not consider myself a member of his tribe. I don't like content on philosophy. I don't like content on philosophers. Their views on freedom are not mine. And so, however, I find Nietzsche. I mean, I'm laughing because I think of all the funny. As Nietzsche himself said, the thought of suicide has gotten me through many a dismal evening. I mean, he said a lot of funny things like that. He
got me through some young years. It was like that. They're like these artificial father figures with great wisdom, but I feel like you kind of outgrow them when you start getting your own life wisdom and dark nights of the soul. And then you look back and you can have a new lens on what they said and reinterpret it. Right.
Right.
But I got to ask you about, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, his opinions on love, because you are a philosopher. And he did say that love can be both an obstacle and an inspiration in the philosopher's life. Where do you sit on that fence?
I remember, I quote him, I'm quoted in the movie, he's quoted, because he also said, when the agents asked me, could I really have this affair with this girl and not fall in love? I told them, look, Nietzsche said, philosophers don't really fall in love. It would be like seeing delicate little hands on a cyclops. Delicate little hands on a cyclops. So yeah, you tell the folks back in DC, if they send word, I'll cut this chick's head off, bury in the Utah desert. No one's going to know a thing. And I said it very casually like that. And the agents freaked out and jumped up in my face and scolded me. It's all depicted in the movie quite accurately. They didn't actually set a gun on the table, but I heard one of them click a weapon out of its holster. And then they stood over screaming at me and saying, listen, if you harm a hair over his head, we're going to kill you ourselves. They're really good men. We all got used. We all got misused.
Yeah. I get what Nietzsche said about, love like that. And I think when I was younger, it hit different. Now that I've had my own, run of bad relationships, I look at Nietzsche and go, oh, that was just an unhealed father wound. You know what I mean? We call those abandonment issues and commitment issues and things like that. All right. So listen, we're getting close to 2 hours, and I really appreciate you giving me this much time, because I feel like I got to know you better, and I know you don't want to, when you can tell anymore, but man, if you ever do that book or another movie, I'll be the first one in line to see it, because your life is truly extraordinary. What's next for you in the immediate future?
What's next for me is a small piece of land with some mules and some cats, and I'm just going to go off and live my days out. I feel we dodged a bullet, and to be honest, I feel like myself and us, you and other influencers and General Flynn, we bought ourselves 4 years that our country should not have had, in the sense of, we dodged a bullet as a country about as close as the bullet that grazed Trump. A bullet that maybe a 5% chance that didn't hit Trump. It didn't hit Trump. And 4 years ago, General Flynn put the odds to me at 5% that we would get through this, that we would get our country through this. We've gotten it through. I've done everything, as there was some Star Wars character who says the Jedi are there to keep the peace. We're not there to fight wars. I can't do anything. We're at this point. We got 4 years to disrupt and expose what was really a Bolshevik revolution. This is an absolute Bolshevik revolution to overthrow the country. It was disguised. It was a Bezmenov psyop. It was disguised under COVID, and there's a new world order, and there's this whole new world we just got to get used to. No one asked our opinion on. We disrupted that. We bought our country 4 years and another 4. The movement getting going so quickly bought us these 4 years. We were never supposed to make it to 2024, but we got to 2024, and now Trump's in. So we got another 4 years. America has to get itself straight in the next 4 years, or else where we were in 2020, 2021, we're going to be back in a Bolshevik revolution. And we can't stop it again. I don't have the resources. And so this is really, I just want people not to forget 3 years ago, the world was surreal. We were having tyranny settle upon us. The United Kingdom has just now said they'll give you up to 15-year prison sentences for looking at the wrong social media. Looking at the wrong social media.
I saw that.
All of this in Canada, that all needs to be stopped and overturned. And only America can do it.
All right. One more question about Obama, and then we can get to closing comments and stuff, because I want to know, and I feel like I just don't know if you can answer. Are we going to see Obama's perp walk?
Well, I don't think he'll be perp walked. I think a deal will be made. And the deal, if I were Trump, I would make a deal that says, look, we don't want to put we will if we have to, but do we really want to put the country through a year of trials and all that stuff? We'll have some kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission. You come out with what you do and what you did, and you just acknowledge it. And then you go to Hawaii and you just shut the hell up for 5 years, just shut up. This has to be the quid pro quo for getting through this without anyone being hung. It is the end of the progressive movement. The progressive movement's communism. Progressives have this theory of social justice that they want to impose, that the world should be organized this other way, and they know how to organize it. And to them, the Constitution is just a set of fetters and is nothing but an impediment to them getting in their way of being able to reorganize the world. And the mask has slipped in the last 4 years. They have no admiration for the Constitution. It's completely clear. They do not believe in limited constitutional government. And the quid pro quo for not having a bunch of hangings for treason is that everybody comes clean, and then it is the end of the progressive movement in America.
I get to go to, I'm a pretty regular at the Clay Clark's Reawaken events. I go to almost all of them, sit in the back with the media table. And it's been a blessing to meet. I've never met you at one of those, but folks like you had sit downs with Flynn, and it's such a blessing to meet the people that are really doing the things behind the scenes. And it's also very calming to know the human side of these folks, and not everyone gets that access. And now that I have this platform, that's what I want to do with it, right? And I want to give the viewers the chance to really see the human side of people like yourself, because I do think even though we're winning, there's still a lot of anxiety out there because there's a lot of uncertainty about what comes next and when. And I feel like meeting folks like yourself and really kind of seeing the man behind the man is very helpful. So I just want to thank you for just, being so real and authentic here with me and all of our viewers, because I think it makes a big impact on a lot of our lives.
It's an honor. It's an honor to have been able to do this. And I spoke at about, I think if there were 28 Reawaken Americas, I probably spoke at about 22 of them. And,
I've seen you at all of them, but we've never met.
And that was Flynn. Flynn, when the smoke clears, what history will see is that Flynn saved this country for 2 years. Flynn realized, he called me in March of 2021 and said, get down to Florida. We're going to start this movement. We're going to unify the tribes. And we have to get out. Americans are psyched out. We need to get on the road with a tour that shows them this is this is still America. You still have rights. And, the three groups were the election integrity groups, the border, the people mad about the borders, and the people mad about medical freedom. And we're going to have speakers on these different subjects and draw people in. It doesn't matter that there's only 1,000 to begin with, or there are 2,000 or so forth. It was the symbolic effect it had, kept Americans, think of where they were in that first half of 2021. They were so psyched out. So anyway, it's been an honor. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you so much. And then before we sign off, just for everyone watching, next week, Wednesday, 3:30 p.m. Pacific, I've got Ivan Raiklan with Key West Jess. You're not going to want to miss that one. And tomorrow morning, if you're free, Patrick, join us. We're going to be, I'm going to be with Rambo and Dave from News Treason. It's going to be a big simulcast. We're going to be covering Kash Patel's confirmation hearing all morning and probably into the afternoon. So I'll be up online at 6:30. So folks, you know where to find their channels. Come find us tomorrow morning. That's going to be great. And next weekend. And thank you all for your support. And if you're watching on X right now and you want to come over to Rumble and give a like, would love to get this episode seen by more people. Thanks again, everybody. And thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.